Hi everyone, and welcome to Risk Awareness Week. My name is Alex Sidorenko, and I'm the host of this conference. And I also have the pleasure of welcoming you to the conference, to the 5 days of amazing workshops, and doing this first presentation on the future trends in risk management, in risk management too. So first, let me start with some housekeeping. The conference is completely online, and that means you can watch it on your tablet, on your phone, on your computer, and that also means if it's night right now in where you are, because the conference has a global reach, and many thousands of people have signed up from more than 100 different countries. So if it is night or early morning or late evening in where you are at the moment and you can't watch every single session, do not worry because all sessions, all replays are available forever. So when you log in to watch a session live or to watch a replay, it's the same procedure, same login, and you can re-watch replays as many times as you like. In fact, you can pause this video, you can walk out, do some things, press play, and it will continue from the same moment again, and you can benefit from really kind of slowing things down, absorbing some of the information. My workshops are relatively easily digestible. Some of the other workshops will be highly technical, highly mathematical, and you will require paying full attention to what's happening on the screen. Now, a few other housekeeping things. At any stage, if you want to ask a question, make a comment, or read what other participants are commenting about this video, you can scroll down. The video will continue broadcasting. The broadcast will continue, and you will continue hearing my voice. But then at the bottom of this page, there's a special section, big section for commenting. You may need to log in. The commenting is done through Discuss, which is a third-party software provider. So you need to log in either using email, or you can be anonymous, or social media login, and that will allow you to leave questions, comments, and just general opinions about the topics being discussed. Another important feature of this conference is that on the right side of the video, there's a little button called Upvote. And if you like the messages, if you like the, or if you're getting value from the workshop, press it, because this is a very good indication for the other hundreds of people that will be watching this workshop on replay. They would understand that these 3 workshops were the best during day 1, or these 5 workshops were the most popular during day 2. And given that many people have quite limited time resource and they only want to watch best of the best, make sure if you watch the workshop and it really struck a chord with you and you enjoyed the message and you found it useful, make sure you upvote it, because it allows us to then prioritize the watching efforts when we're going to look at replays. So that's, I think, all on the housekeeping. Now, in terms of the setup, in terms of the conference, and by the way, say hello to my little Risk Awareness Week octopus on the on the sweatshirt that I got specifically for this conference. You can buy them on Amazon, I think, in Spain and in US. By the way, if you just search for Risk Awareness Week. In terms of the conference, 5 days, pretty much 9 to 5, full days, a lot of content. Highly unlikely anyone will be able to digest it in just in a single sitting. So break it up, watch some replays, come back to the workshops the following day. And because the workshops are available forever, I mean, this is 21st century. The content is now there with us forever, so you don't really have to take a full week leave from work and just non-stop watch, because I don't think a human brain can comprehend that much complex and valuable information in a single sitting anyway. So break it up, watch few workshops a day, watch replays the following day, and and go through there, and leave some workshops for the following week as well. So to make it easier for you to navigate the risk awareness week, day one is dedicated to risk management in governance. Everything to do with how to set up risk management, how to establish the relationship with the boards, how to turn risk into risk capital and make it valuable for the shareholders, how to link it with strategy department, finance department, treasury department, and so on. Everything about governance. Day two is dedicated to climate and environment. And we will have amazing speakers sharing, including myself. I'm going to share quite a wonderful story on how we created a calculator using a stochastic decision tree for our environmental teams. And day two is dedicated to practical step-by-step risk modeling workshops, how to apply risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis, to important climate and environmental decisions. Day three is all about risk perception, risk psychology. Why is our human brain built in a way that doesn't comprehend risk, ignores risk, doesn't take risk into account when making decisions, or misjudges probabilities, or misjudges control effectiveness? That's day three. A lot of interesting and very practical workshops on how to overcome biases, how to deal with heuristics, how to improve expert judgments, opinions, and so on. Day four is all about project management. So your cost and schedule risk analysis. How to apply quantitative risk analysis to make better schedule and budgeting and CapEx decisions for small investment projects, large construction projects, and again, amazing workshops from all over the world, sharing their experience on how to apply some of the best quantitative techniques in the project management setting. And then day five, the final day of the conference, is all about integrating risk management into decision making. So how to use risk management techniques, quantitative risk analysis in important business decisions, investment decisions, insurance decisions. I, for example, am going to share a wonderful case study on how we've saved. It is actually, the topic says how we saved 10 million in premiums. It's actually now close to 11 million in premiums and counting, by better understanding our risk profile, by better quantifying our risk profiles across different insurance lines, and by better communicating our risk profile with first the brokers and then the insurance markets. So day five is all about practical application. How do we take these techniques that we have in our risk management belt and how we apply it to important and very costly, very material decisions in our business. So that's the setup. I hope you enjoy the conference, and if you've missed something, don't worry, because you can always watch a replay. And do use this opportunity to communicate. And I know it's virtual, so it's a slightly new environment for all of us. Communicate with the speakers, ask questions below this video and below all the other videos. Upvote sessions, workshops that you found personally valuable, so that everyone else knows which are the best workshops. And then talk to one another in the comments. If you see somebody is asking a question and you know the answer, or you have a view, a position on this, don't be shy. Write a comment. And you can take screenshots, you can post screenshots to social media. In fact, I encourage everyone to share. If any of you know me personally, I have been following my work over the last 7 years on LinkedIn. I hope you know that I really, really, really like sharing. And that's why I made our book available for free, and it's now been downloaded over 150,000 times. And if you just Google free risk management book, it's number one, and it's available to everyone. And that's why I share a lot of the lessons and practical implementation steps and so on. And I also write a lot of articles and do videos, and I try to share everything for free. And that's what I want, kind of, that's the culture, that's the behavior I want to drive with this Risk Awareness Week. That's why access is free to a limited number of workshops or very cheap for the whole the whole platform. Share screenshots, share quotes, share some of the important messages that you like. Just put it out there. This is, after all, called Risk Awareness Week. So we're trying to build awareness for risk-based decision making, for risk management too. And more importantly, and I think this is the risk managers are the worst offenders, because they watch these sessions and they think, oh, this is super valuable. I wish someone in my procurement team knew about this, or I wish my head of strategy knew about this, or I wish someone in our treasury team applied the same rigor or the same techniques to the risk analysis. Well, don't just think about it, just send them the link. Because if there's a specific workshop that you want someone in your team to watch, that means that workshop will be completely free for that person. So send them the link, say register for this, you're gonna watch the replay starting from your 7th minute. It's actually very valuable and we can apply it in our workplace tomorrow. So I encourage everyone to be as open-minded and as sharing as possible. And with that, I wanted to talk about the 4 trends that I have been observing over the last year, since the last Risk Awareness Week. Given that I work full-time as the head of operational investment risk and insurance at one of the largest fertilizer companies in the world and one of the largest coal companies in Central and Eastern Europe, I have less and less time to publish. So I try to collect all my thoughts, all my lessons learned, and just put it out there as part of the Risk Awareness Week. So 4 trends that are changing my personal career and my approach and attitude towards risk. And this is something that I'm learning, and the hypotheses that I'm testing and proving and disproving every day. So message number 1, quantitative risk analysis as opposed to qualitative risk analysis is a given. And if you're watching this and you're still surprised why heat maps should not be used for any risk analysis of significance, and in fact they produce wrong priorities and they misrepresent information and misguide decisions, if this is still somehow you've been living under a rock, this is somehow news to you, then at the bottom of this page I've provided 4 links. You can pause, you can you take a picture of the screen. There is a scientific article called the risk of using risk matrices. There's a video done by Osama Salah, who has wonderfully summarized the biggest issues on why we should never use heat maps. There's a sarcastic, joking article written by David Vos, who is also a speaker at the Risk Awareness Week later this week, which again summarizes the many reasons why you should never use heat maps, and he's doing it in a very funny way, and that article became probably like one of the most popular risk management articles on LinkedIn ever. So well done to him. And then of course there are actual books written by Doug Hubbard, who again goes into a lot of different research and empirical studies on why heat maps should never be used. and he's also a speaker at the Risk Awareness Week. So I am grateful to all the wonderful people that found the time to kind of to share their knowledge with you as part of this, very close risk management to community. However, the message is a little bit more complex than just saying don't use qualitative risk analysis, don't be an idiot. The message is actually whenever we can use quantitative risk analysis, we should very quickly realize that doing quantitative risk analysis just for the sake of quantitative risk analysis is probably not a good enough reason, because quantitative risk analysis takes a lot of effort. It is actually quite a complex exercise, and it takes a lot of time. And this is something that I've been learning as part of my job as the head of operational and investment risk, is that to do risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis properly, actually takes a lot of effort. And you better have a good reason for it, because you have to justify why, for example, a decision needs to be delayed by X number of days or weeks sometimes to perform proper quantitative risk analysis. And the reasons are various, obviously, but some of the important ones is that whenever you start talking about investment in mitigation, whenever you have choices between different mitigation techniques, whenever there is budgets involved, you have to have a view on what the risk profile looks like. And the only kind of the better or the best way to have a view on what the risk profile looks like is to quantify it. So quantifying risk makes a lot of sense when you are on the verge of spending a lot of money or approving that spending. And that's when risk analysis has the most value, is whenever you're trying to choose between different alternatives. Should we build a smaller water purification facility or larger water purification facility? The difference between those investment projects could be millions of dollars. And that's when you need to really understand, well, what does the risk profile looks under option A, and what does the risk profile look under option B? And then you start comparing. Well, given this risk profile, is this amount of spending is justified? What are our expected losses? What are our unexpected losses? How much do we need to budget as reserves for the expected losses? How much do we need to allocate in risk capital for our unexpected losses? And how much insurance, with what sort of limits do we need to purchase, with what sort of deductibles for our tails, our above 95th percentile consequences? That's when quantitative risk analysis makes perfect sense and requires all the effort necessary to do it properly. But whenever you're trying to talk about risks with, for example, you have 5 projects in your portfolio, and you want to understand, well, what are the big issues in each of the projects? The top 3 or the top 5 issues, risks, are usually evident, kind of self-evident to everyone in the team. And there's probably not a lot of value of quantifying the top 5 or top 3 risks just for the sake of proving that there are top 5 or top 3 risks, because it's kind of obvious usually, because there's a big gap between, well, those are the deal breakers, and then there's everything else. It makes sense to start quantifying those risks when you, in the project context, when you start talking about contingencies, when you need to communicate to the shareholder, well, how much could those risks delay the startup? What's the lost revenue gonna look like? When you start actually talking about the mitigation, talking about the contingencies, the reserves for those risks, when you start talking numbers, then you need to bring the quantification to the table. If you're just having a conversation with other project managers, what are the top 3 risks for the project, you're probably pretty good with just saying, well, these are the kind of the obvious deal breakers that we think about the project, and we need to monitor them. The same with another example recently was with sanctions and economic embargoes or additional tariffs. Back of the envelope calculation showed that if a particular geography were to introduce additional tariffs for our product, that would cost dozens of millions, not thousands of dollars, but millions of dollars. So that was enough to start working on plan B, C, D, and start working on the mitigation to kind of to kick off the initiative to start thinking and dealing with those risks. However, once you get to the actual tangible mitigations and you say, well, okay, we can spend this much on lobbying, or we can spend this much on changing the production process, or we can spend this much on rerouting the products to other markets. Once you actually start talking about mitigations with numbers, then you need to make sure you have quantitative risk analysis to compare the cost of the mitigation to the change in the risk profile. So that was an interesting kind of one for me, because when I did a lot of training and consulting, it's always easy to say, oh, we need to quantify all the risks, and kind of risk quantification is almost the first step in the process. Once you identify the risks, once you know what the different assumptions are, you should immediately quantify it. Well, at least in my experience, and again, everything I say is just purely on my personal experience, and in fact, I am very interested in hearing what your thoughts on this are in the comments below this video. So in my experience is that quantifying is important, but only if you are on the verge of making an important financial decision about mitigation. Same conversation I usually have with internal auditors. They say, oh, we need to quantify risks. I'm saying, why do you need to quantify risks in this specific instance? Because once you quantify a risk, you have a distribution, you have your risk profile, which is distribution for a particular risk or a group of risks, and then you have your expected losses, your unexpected losses, and your tail, and you need to use that information for something. If you have nothing to use this information for, other than just prioritize the risks, well, you can probably prioritize the risks without all this extra quantitative work. Just to know, what are the top 3 or the top 5, a conversation is usually sufficient. That being said, you will quite quickly get to a stage where, okay, we know what's important. Now we need to figure out what are the best mitigations. And by that stage, you already need to quantify risks. That was number 1. The second big eye-opener for me, and Sam Savage is going to talk a lot more about this during this Risk Awareness Week, and he's been just taking my hat off to Sam Savage for being such a visionary, because he has been talking about this for the last 2 Risk Awareness Week. 2019, 2020, he's been saying the same thing, and now kind of dealing with this on a day-to-day basis as the head of risk. I just cannot thank him enough for what he's doing with SIPMath and probabilitymanagement.org. Because the second message, the second kind of big lesson for me is that everyone, the kind of the end game is that business starts making decisions stochastically, because the world is stochastic and we need to account for uncertainty when making decisions. It is quite naive to make deterministic decisions in the stochastic world. The world is random. A lot of things are very volatile, and just taking averages and using averages for decision making, we're setting up ourselves for failure, because we're ignoring this volatility in our assumptions and hence in our outcomes of our decisions. And so the end game of amazing risk management, the end game is that every important decision in the business, budget, pricing, strategy, investment, M&A, construction projects, expansions, new markets, every important material decision should be stochastic. That means that if the assumptions are volatile, we should treat them as such. We should make assumptions volatile, and then we should simulate how those correlated assumptions would affect our outcome. And we should look at the full distribution of possible outcomes, not just one scenario. Any decision in business could be amazing or really, really horrible, and everything in between. And understanding this proportion of bad scenarios, bad outcomes to good outcomes is essentially what risk management tool is all about, helping business understand how does uncertainty affect and change the decision. So that's the end game. And to do that, that means that everyone in the business, everywhere in the business, whenever they make a decision, they should be using some sort of distributions on their assumptions. And this, what struck me as just completely bizarre, is that if you look around, whichever country you're in, whichever country you're watching from right now, if you look around your peers in your country, in your industry, or in your country, I can guarantee you're modeling very similar risks. And the only problem is every single company is modeling those risks differently. You're all modeling inflations, US, European, and your local inflation. You're all modeling foreign exchange, your dollar to euro, dollar to your local currency, euro to your local currency. You're all modeling gas prices, oil prices, electricity prices. There are so many, as well as all your products that you sell, and metal prices and so on. There are so many assumptions that we all model simultaneously, but we all do it differently. And in fact, we don't even know who's doing it better, who's doing it worse. I think the kind of the bizarre part of the situation is that every single person is reinventing the wheel instead of start talking to one another. And this is what we're trying to do in Russia at the moment. We're trying to agree on certain methodologies for certain types of risks. For example, foreign exchange. There are very limited number of different approaches that you can use to model uncertainty around the fluctuations of foreign exchange. And we don't have to use different ones if we backtest and agree on an approach. Again, you can maybe make adjustments to your approach. Someone wants it a little bit more high-level simplistic, somebody wants it a little bit more complex and add more stress. There are parameters that you can play with, but the overall kind of equation is very, very similar. So not only across the companies, but within the company, treasury, and this is something that I can guarantee is very common to large organizations. Treasury is modeling foreign exchange using one methodology. Strategy is modeling foreign exchange using a different methodology. Risk is modeling foreign exchange using a third methodology. Procurement and construction and investment projects and M&A teams modeling foreign exchange probably using 5 other methodologies. And then there's market intelligence that models their own view, and so on. There's financial controlling who can also model their own, and so on. Within a single company, there could be dozens of approaches to modeling the same risks, which to me is completely bizarre. And so my second theme, and I think this is what the future of risk management looks like, is that we're moving towards stochastic libraries. Because once someone creates a stochastic library for a particular variable, for an assumption, and then backtests that and makes it transparent, makes it auditable, and then the audit checks from time to time that it is working fine, and it is predicting within the confidence interval that it was designed to predict. Once somebody sets up this library, then anyone in the organization or industry for that matter can pull it and use within seconds. So whenever we want to model price risk, or whenever we want to quantify, do an NPV at risk, or do a cost and schedule risk analysis, whenever we do that, we have to start from scratch and create our own distributions, which is such a waste of time. If only we took the effort to create stochastic libraries and then just reuse them. And the kind of the other side of the coin is that once you create stochastic libraries, you can't really do it manually. You have to code it so they are constantly updated and backtested, and they continue to become relevant. You can't just do it once and kind of forget about it forever. So my second theme for the future of risk management, and I'm very passionate about this one, and just make sure you watch Sam Savage's sessions during this Risk Awareness Week, where he's going to talk a little bit more about that. Stochastic libraries are, I think, the future. We create libraries for risk analysis once, and then anyone in the organization can use them to make their own stochastic decisions. Now, coming out from that, my third big theme, and again, this is something that working in risk is, I face this almost on a daily basis, and I called it, without a backtest, you are just another person with an opinion. And what I'm trying to say is that it is not enough to just move from qualitative to quantitative. Qualitative gives you unacceptable error in judgment, and that has been backtested and proven. And so our kind of natural conclusion is, well, we're going to move from qualitative to quantitative. Well, the trouble is that the quantitative risk analysis can also give you errors which would be above your confidence level. And that's why whenever you move to quantitative risk analysis, you have to backtest your methodologies. You can't just say, oh, we're going to do a cost and schedule risk analysis, we're going to replace all of our WBS items with triangular distributions, and that's going to be a huge improvement on the previous deterministic scenario. It is going to be an improvement, but it may not be a big enough improvement to be acceptable for the decision makers. And that's why we have to backtest everything that we do. And I'm a strong believer that as a risk professional, our duty of care is to not only move from qualitative to quantitative risk analysis, but to also backtest and make the results of the backtest transparent and auditable to the rest of the organization. We've done this on a number of occasions where it is traditional in the industry to use normal distribution for certain market variables as a very simplistic calculation, because it reduces the calculation power tremendously. It just makes everything quicker, easier, and we had to backtest, well, can we actually represent certain variables as normal distributions? And the answer was no, we could not. It did not pass the backtest. And so we could not continue using this simple, very quick solution, which was generally used in the market, because it didn't pass the backtest, and in fact it was skewing the results. It was actually leading to bad judgments, or worse judgments than they could have been. So we had to do a slower, more complex task of distribution fitting and so on. So the third message and the third trend in the future of risk management is that just going from qualitative to quantitative is not good enough. You have to backtest and prove to yourself and to internal auditors and to the shareholders that whenever you went to a new technique, it actually proved to be a valuable improvement compared to what you've been doing, before. And this will highly, the complexity of the backtest will highly depend on the confidence interval that your shareholders and your management use in their decision making. Because, for example, and this was quite an eye-opening story for me. We've used bootstrapping for macro risks, for market risks, and at the 90% confidence interval, so at the VAR 95, it actually passed the backtest. It showed that it was a good technique for modeling future volatility around price movements and foreign exchange and so on, only to find out that our shareholder actually in his mind didn't have a 90% confidence interval, he had a 97% confidence interval. So he wanted to make sure that whenever we calculate risks, we account for fat tails. And on some of the variables that we used for modeling, there were fat tails. And on the 97th confidence interval, the bootstrap that we used did not pass the test, and hence he didn't want us to use it for his his appetite for risk. So it's very important to match your techniques and your back tests to the actual management expectations. Now, I'm guessing we're quite in a quite unique situation because our shareholder is highly mathematical, has a background in banking and risk. So he has a much higher demand. My guess is that many managers out there, many shareholders, would be absolutely fine with a 90% confidence interval. That means you have VAR 95%, and that would pass backtest on most technique that we use today. But I wanted to leave you with this third message because it's very important. You can, with risk analysis, and that kind of goes for the qualitative risk analysis as well, you can use absolutely anything you want as long as you backtest and you show that that did not decrease the quality of the decision making or that the error was acceptable. Because, and I think this is where the irony is, if 99% of the people that are using heat maps ever did a backtest of their methodology, they would just be ashamed on how far off the reality their risk analysis was when they were doing it. They would be missing the real valuable insights by so many miles. Then it would be not called risk management. It would probably be called witchcraft or something. And I'm guessing that's why most of the risk managers don't do backtests, because they're kind of scared to discover that they've just been pushing this pseudo scientific nonsense, calling it risk management. Well, I think we, as the community around the Risk Awareness Week, I think we're mature enough to say, if we do something, we're going to backtest it, and if it's not going to pass the backtest, we're not going to do it again, because that would be negligence. And then the final message that I wanted to share as part of this kind of introductory session, and by the way, ask questions in the comments, click upvote if you found this session valuable, and do not forget to do exactly the same for the other sessions as well that you watch. Click upvote if it's valuable, ask questions, write comments, disagree passionately in the section just below the video. Quick reminder, there's a little button at the bottom left called technical support. Don't write questions in the technical support, because technical support doesn't care about risk management. Right underneath the video in the discuss section for for commenting. So the final message, and the final, I think, the kind of the future trend is that we will finally realize that the math behind most of the uncertainties on the planet is very similar. And there are only a number of techniques that we can use to make sense out of most risks on the planet. What really what makes me absolutely crazy, and what I'm trying to overcome with this conference and the past conferences, past risk awareness week conferences, that I'm going to share some examples with you, is that we keep talking about a risk. Last year it was cyber. This year, the year before, 2019, it was cyber. Last year it was COVID. This year it's ECG. Every year we keep changing kind of this agenda item, and we keep talking about, and the questions that I get, I just they just make me crazy. Is how do you deal with this and that, climate risk, or how do you deal with cyber risk? When in fact the math behind both cyber and climate is almost identical. It's a stochastic decision tree on one instance, it's a stochastic decision tree in other instance. I do not understand, why do we not talk about decision trees? Why do we not talk about how do you make a decision tree stochastic? Because once you learn how to do a stochastic decision tree, you can quantify 95% of the risks on the planet. And for the, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm trying to convey a message that there are literally a handful of techniques. Some scorings, which you have to backtest because scorings give you a lot of error. Decision trees, scenarios, simulations. These techniques, they cover majority of the issues. So if in fact we were to learn how to use a Bayesian decision tree, or and make it a stochastic decision tree, that would cover most of the risks on the planet. And yet we keep reinventing the wheel. We thinking, okay, well, climate, that's a new risk and it requires new approaches and methodologies. It doesn't. It can be quantified, analyzed, dissected using the same methodologies that have been used since 70s, 60s, and even earlier. And that's why I think the final kind of message, the final trend, the final theme in my world, in my future risk management world, is that we finally stop reinventing the wheel every year for the new risk, and we just start talking about the actual scientific techniques that we can apply to different risks. And this is what you will learn at the Risk Awareness Week this week. You will, for example, there is going to be a session of me and Brian Putt talking about whether we need or not to take an umbrella to go outside. The silliest problem ever. However, we're going to show you a strategy table, a decision tree, an influence diagram, and make it stochastic. And the irony is that we're going to show it to you in that very simple kind of silly scenario, but that's the same technique you would use for a multi-billion-dollar oil exploration project. Identical approach. Once you know the kind of the math behind it, what's under the bonnet, it doesn't matter what the facade says. If it says cyber risk or climate risk or any other sexy risk next year or COVID, it doesn't matter, because once you know what's under the bonnet, you can apply the techniques to any risks on the planet. And this is what I pride our team in. We can quantify any issue because we have those 5 techniques nailed down. Or another example, another speaker will talk about killing James Bond. Again, silliest topic possible, specifically sarcastic, specifically ironic, but he's going to show you how to apply a Bayesian decision tree. And that's the same technique you would apply to a multi-billion-dollar investment project building a new methanol plant, or literally any other huge construction project, or making a decision around cyber or climate. This is what I want Risk Awareness Week to be all about. We're talking about the actual under the bonnet techniques that you can then apply, reapply to any situation. This is what makes a powerful risk manager. A powerful risk manager is not someone who has quantified climate risk once. A powerful risk manager is someone who knows how to use scenarios and simulations so he can quantify any risk, including climate, and he can do it in a cost-efficient manner, and he can do it using stochastic libraries, so he doesn't have to waste time on the preparation and so on. So these are my four messages. Quantitative risk analysis is a given, but it's not the end in itself. Quantitative risk analysis has to lead to some sort of choices. You have to compare, you have to calculate your risk profile, and then you have to compare it to how much you reserve, how much capital you allocate, how much you spend on mitigation for your expected losses, and how much you insure for the tails. Second message, a lot of effort is spent on preparation. 90% of the risk analysis is preparation, is building your distributions, correlating those distributions. Then you press simulate. That actually is literally like 5 minutes, depending on the complexity of your model. I mean, we have models that simulate 30 or 40 minutes for 10,000 scenarios. But you can save a lot of time on that preparation. Stochastic libraries are the future. Do the homework, set up your correlated stochastic libraries, your distributions, and then you can reuse them as long as they are updated and they stay current. Whatever you apply, you can apply any kind of risk analysis you want, as long as it passes a backtest. If you've never backtested your methodology, I think that's professional negligence. And it is absolutely critical to prove with your skin in the game that whatever you apply actually improves decision making and not makes it worse. And the final fourth message is most of the things have been done before. You don't have to reinvent the wheel just because there's a new name or the new sexy risk on the block. The underlying methodologies are and have been available and have been available for decades. My wish is that at the next offline conference somewhere in Canada, US, or Australia, or London, people start talking about how to do better stochastic decision trees, as opposed to why climate risk is unique and super sexy and is very relevant. Because once you understand the underlying techniques, you can deal with any risk on the planet. With that, I thank you for your attention. I remind you to watch all the other workshops either live or in replays. And if you like it, upvote, ask questions, write comments, use this opportunity to talk in comments section with other participants, answer their questions, contribute your thoughts. If you found a valuable resource or a template, do share it in the comments underneath this video. And by the way, most of the speakers have agreed to share their models, so you will be able to download in the middle of the page on the right. In the very middle of the page on the right, there's usually a download section where you can download slides, or you can download sample models, or you can download checklists, or you can download additional literature to read. A lot of valuable resources. Use this opportunity to learn, and more importantly, if you've learned something, share that learning with someone else in your organization. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next workshops.